perpetuity. So they'll always be affordable, and that won't ever change. So I don't know how familiar you are with this stuff. I could, again, jump in with any questions, but that's my first point on what is affordable, and it's affordable rental. The next point we wanted to highlight is that it's privately owned housing. So Metro West, as the nonprofit that we are, we own the land. So even if it's if a town or a municipality wants to turn excess land into affordable housing, they would sell the land to us, or they would lease it in a long-term lease for 99 years, which is required by the financing programs that we use. So practically, it's kind of the same as us owning it. So either we own or we lease the land. We serve as the developer. We serve in the development role. We sign all the contracts. We get the financing, and we own and operate the building in the long run. So we kind of are in the primary role. It's privately owned, and we work with a professional property manager. So we have staff on site overseeing contracts, making sure the grass is cut, things are kept up, things are well maintained. And typically when we build an development, it's at least 40 apartments per development. And that's driven by the need to have rents pay for that professional third-party property manager to make sure that it's well maintained and well run. And it's also driven by the fact that apartments are less expensive to build in higher density and larger number. And also by some of the constraints of the financing programs that we use. So it depends, the exact number, it depends on the property, it depends on the finances of how the specific building, the specific finances we use for that development, but that's kind of the rule of thumb of about 40 apartments. 40 is kind of our minimum. So that's the second point. The third point is that we use dedicated financing. So financing kind of an array of resources, almost all of which are targeted specifically for affordable housing. And it's really typical for one of our projects to have 15 to 20 different sources of financing. So we kind of put together a package of financing from multiple different sources. Typically, the biggest source of financing that we use is the Low-Income Housing Tax Credit Program. That's a federal program, and it's administered by the states. So we apply for that funding from the state, even though it ultimately comes from the federal government. And we pair that, even though that's the largest source, we pair that with a lot of other sources. So we'll have a typical loan, which is a loan from a private bank, like a typical mortgage. It's paid for by rents. We also have other federal sources, other federal subsidy. We'll have states. The state of Massachusetts has its own low-income housing tax credit program and multiple different sources of subsidy, and also local sources. So in order to receive an allocation of low-income housing tax credits from the state, a development has to have a local match from the municipality that it's in. And that's an upfront contribution, so there's no ongoing cost to the municipality. But you have to have some kind of local match. And typically, even when we've built projects on land given to us by the town or the city at nominal cost, we've also gotten a capital contribution from the municipality, but the state does consider the fact that the municipality is contributing land if they are. And the amount of that contribution from a municipality can range. On some of our projects recently in towns, we've gotten about $600,000 or $650,000. And projects in a larger city, a recent project, we're getting a few $1 million. So there's a range. One other type of financing that we often get that's not listed here is an operating subsidy called a project-based voucher. And what that does is it does give us some ongoing operating subsidy every year from the state or from the federal government. And that lets us provide apartments at even lower rents that are more deeply affordable. And because to be affordable to folks who are very low income, the rents are so low, we get ongoing funding from the state or from the federal government for that project-based subsidy. And so that's what lets us have apartments at 30% of the area of median income. So that's kind of the overview of the typical financing that we use. And the last point I wanted to highlight is that we build high quality housing. It's well designed, it fits in with the surroundings. Folks don't look at it and think, oh, that's some ugly affordable housing. It just looks like kind of modern apartment building. Like Caitlin said, it's sustainable. We build at Passive House standards. On a lot of recent projects, we tried to incorporate solar, which we've been able to do. We're in the process of doing at Glenbrook Way, the project we just finished that's on the right here. They're accessible. So units are accessible. Typically, the entire project can be visited by someone in a wheelchair, and sometimes we have units with additional accessibility features, and they're well maintained, especially because they have a professional property manager like I've been talking about. So that was a lot of information. I can keep going, but any questions or thoughts?
Thanks, Sharon. I had a couple questions. So is the property manager a Metro West Community Development employee, or is that like a independent contractor? How does that work?
It's an independent third-party firm. So for most of our properties, the property manager is Maloney Properties. They're, their own large company. They do property management for lots of developments all around New England. And we sign an agreement with them to provide the staff and run the day-to-day operations of the property.
And how long have you guys been doing this?
Metro West has been around since 1991, but we've been doing low-income housing tax credit projects since about 2010.
And like how many like buildings and or units currently in this space do you guys own and are managing?
Sure. I think, Caitlin, you took, the total numbers are sometimes on a slide, but they're not. Caitlin, what are the current numbers? I think it's 154 units in our portfolio right now.
That's right. Yep.
Of affordable rental units. And then we have another 75 in the pipeline. So that's, what is that, 4 projects, Caitlin?
So do you guys sell these buildings sometimes? Is that how?
Typically not. We've only done a handful of developments, and
Okay.
each one's some of the earlier ones were a little bit smaller than our current kind of minimum 40 number.
I had a question on the financing. I mean, how do towns normally navigate that, and like who's responsible for it? I mean, you mentioned it was like 15 different sources. That sounds like a lot of work.
Yes, the developer.
Okay.
And I'll go into more about who does what. But the developer, we're the ones we put together the budget, we apply for all of the financing, we're responsible for all of the compliance for the financing and all of that.
Okay.
If you don't have any other immediate questions, I could keep going and I'll go into the roadmap on who does what. So this is kind of a typical roadmap for a development on town-owned land. And it'll start off with motivation and the idea from the local folks, from the municipality. And then the next steps would be thinking about feasibility of a site and getting site control, which sometimes that starts with feasibility and then site control, or maybe it starts with site control and then feasibility. And then town or body of the town would issue a request for proposals for the site. So that would be the municipality with technical assistance. And then at that point, the developer takes over and runs all the rest of the process. And so I'll go through each of these kind of sections. So just a point, it sounds like you already have a motivation and an idea as folks from Southborough. One point we wanted to make is that political will and strong leadership are really key, and they're key over the life of the project. And affordable developments can take 5 or more years to be completed because you need to do permitting, and then it can take 2 years or sometimes more to get financing from the state. And then you have to go through building it and leasing it. So it's a really long, drawn out process. And the key to success is that kind of strong and ongoing support from the local side of things. And then once you have the idea, it's time to look more specifically at a site to see if it's feasible for development, to get site control if it's not already owned by the town, and then to run an RFP. And what, from Metro West perspective, what we stress about these 3 steps is that technical assistance is really key. Even if there are folks on the town who know development, often there are really finicky things about affordable development in particular, which mean that having technical assistance is really important. And we would say that it's important for determining project feasibility, for setting community engagement groundwork, and then for creating an RFP that will meet developer requirements. And what we found is that having community engagement when a body is crafting a request for proposals and kind of originally, at the start when they're thinking about turning a site into affordable housing, having community engagement at that point really sets the groundwork. It gets input early. It helps neighbors feel like they know what's going on and they're in the loop. And it sets up a project for success later on when they're when an RFP is being awarded, when the developer is starting permitting and everything like that. So technical assistance can help with that, but just that's an important piece of it. But also they can really help with the nitty-gritty. And like I said, the nitty-gritty that sometimes is really specific to affordable development as well. So things that it's helpful to have technical assistance around. Examples would be 1, the disposition process and thinking about if there are votes required from town meeting or central government, when is that happening? And will there be any title issues with it? Has it been done correctly? Also thinking about due diligence requirements. Example of that would be which questions is HUD going to ask when HUD does its environmental review in 3 years about the project. And so if you work with someone who can provide technical assistance, they'll know what those questions are, what studies you need to do, and they can help a town do due diligence and include it in an RFP, which makes it a lot easier for a developer to answer an RFP. Because when you have the due diligence in the RFP, the developer knows, is this a good bet? Will this site work out? And they have the information to answer the questions they're asking. Another good example that's really specific to this kind of development is what about the RFP might or might not create a requirement for public bidding or for the project to meet prevailing wage requirements or other standards. And it sometimes isn't straightforward, like how strict design requirements are can actually determine whether or not a project has to comply with wage requirements. So someone providing technical assistance knows to check that and make sure a town or issuing an RFP is being intentional about whether or not those will apply. So that's our plug. We, I've said it multiple times. We really recommend that folks get technical assistance for an RFP. You can reach out to a few different places. The Massachusetts Housing Partnership, MHP, has some resources. They have staff that can help folks put together an RFP. Mass Housing has a grant program that can provide funding for a town to work with a consultant to do feasibility studies and to put together an RFP as well.
Oh, that's great. And I will say, Sharon, I'll echo the Mass Housing does have a technical assistance program or funding, and it's on a rolling basis. So more just for the other community members. So if we get to this stage, definitely there are resources available for us to bring on a consultant to help us with this.
Yeah. So the town will, after they have the idea, they'll look at a site, get site control, do the feasibility studies, and then put together the RFP. And then at that point, Metro West or another developer will come in, they'll submit a proposal, and we would completely take over. We would do all the technical tasks from there through the end of the project. So Metro West hires the architect, the civil engineer, all the other consultants to finalize the design, make sure the plan, their architectural plans, traffic studies, anything like that. Metro West would file the permit application, go through the permit process from beginning to end. There's someone whose name says Doug with a hand up, and I'm happy to pause.
I'm Doug Manz's doppelganger. My name's actually Tom Bisco. I'm posing under Doug Manz's connection here. But one question I had at that point when Metro West would take over the project, they'd hire the architect, they do all the design. How much does the town, or is the town able to have an involvement in the project design at that point? In other words, how much is done, even on an informal basis? Because I imagine if the town gets to the point where they put in an RFP, they're going to have some idea of what they want on the property. They're not just going to turn it over to a developer and say, put up whatever you want. We kind of want townhouses and have the developer put up a 30-story, apartment building. So can you talk about what the sort of involvement of the town is at that point?
Sure. And I can get into the specifics, but in general, I've said Metro West will take over, but for all of these things, we would keep the town in the loop, certainly. And so on a lot of these projects, we meet with the town staff every other week, every month, and keep them up to date on everything going on. But so specifically for design, typically, if a town issues an RFP, they'll have general guidelines in the RFP for what they're looking for at the site. So there might be an approximate number of units or a range of units. There might be some guidelines about the type of design they're looking for. And then the developer in their proposal will have a general site plan, maybe a preliminary rendering subject to change, preliminary floor plans and elevations. And so that would be part of a proposal, and the town would see that in an initial proposal. So they'd have that information typically when they're choosing a developer and kind of signing on to their development concept. And then, so that would be, an initial scheme, and that can be subject to typically small changes. At that point, if Metro West is designated as the developer, we might have to do due diligence. The better the RFP is, the less due diligence we have to do, and so the less a site plan is subject to change. But sometimes you have to figure out exactly where wetlands are, or you have to test the soil, or you're doing traffic studies. You're just making sure the site plan you proposed really works. And then at that point, typically, kind of final design changes would be through the permitting process. And usually we'll use 40B. But as an example, the development scheme really can't change too much from what the developers put forward in their original proposal. So we're really sticking to that proposal unless there's some constraint or, that came up before. So like, we wouldn't change the number of units more than 10% swing in either direction. So we're not going to
That would be part of the proposal, because that'd be my,
Right.
not concern, but just trying to get a feel for how this works. If, the town got comfortable with hypothetically some project that was, the RFP came in for 30 units, and then for whatever reason, 2 years in, construction costs go up and supply chain issues come up, and all of a sudden the developer says, in order for this to pencil out now, we need 45 units. And so that's just what we're going to do. So at that point, are there controls that the town has in place to say, no, if you're going to do that, we're not going to send you? Because I imagine you don't take down title to the property at that point. You're not taking out title to the property until you get all the permits.
Yes. Typically we wouldn't acquire the property until we have all the financing set up and we're ready to start construction.
Okay. Gotcha.
And one step I guess I haven't gone into is when an RFP process is finished and you have a proposal that you like, the town will sign a development agreement with the developer, and that will lay out, this is a proposal for this many apartments. It's going to be
I see.
affordable. Here's what
That's
will
one of the
happen.
controls. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Gotcha. Thanks. Sorry.
Sure. No, I welcome questions. Yeah, and so smaller changes like the type of material on the outside of the building, maybe the exact shape of the building, the number of parking spaces, things like that will be through the permit process. So through the ZBA, typically, Metro West usually will use the 40B comprehensive permit process. And again, if there's already been an RFP process, and if there's been community engagement through the RFP process, that can be really helpful for the permitting process because it lays a lot of groundwork. Neighbors have heard of the project, they've given some input in it. And so we've had a lot of success when there has been all of that groundwork and going through the permit process quickly and relatively easily. So on our last few projects that completed the permit process, you know, it took 3 or 4 months, not a lot of meetings. It was relatively easy because there was that groundwork.
Right. And the town wants the project, so that makes things easier, I imagine.
Yeah.
Yeah. And as you do a 40B project, which only requires 25% to be affordable, but you do full 100% affordable.
Yes.
Yeah, gotcha. 25 is just a floor, it's not a ceiling, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Exactly. So we'll do the permitting. Metro West puts together the budget, applies for the financing, signs the agreements for the financing. All of that is completely the entity responsible for that. Metro West hires the general contractor. We oversee the general contractor, so staff, is on site every week, making sure things are going smoothly, there are no problems. Then we oversee lease up. I say oversee because the third-party property manager will run the day-to-day lease up, but they'll run a lottery. They'll oversee screening of tenants, signing leases, and then, we're overseeing them, making sure that that goes well and there are no problems once the tenants move in. And just anything else, picking siding colors, to doing traffic studies. Metro West or any developer just, is responsible for everything after they're designated as the developer. Great, so here's an example of a project that went through this process in Hudson. It's our project currently under construction at 62 Packard Street. And here's how it went there. So in Hudson, the motivation came from the Affordable Housing Trust, and there was a select.
Sorry, Sharon,
Yeah.
Sharon, can I just interrupt? I just want to tell the rest of the board. So this is the example we put into the 21 Highland report. So when we said, hey, here's an example of a project that can be done with a public-private partnership, this Packard Street example is what we used in the 21 Island report, just to give everyone some context here. So I'm sorry, go ahead, Sharon.
Sure, oh, no problem, but it's actually Sharon, just so you know.
Oh, Sharon, sorry.
No problem. I didn't know that, but good to know. So there, the Affordable Housing Trust and a member of the select board really saw that the housing market was changing. It was becoming less affordable. They also knew that the state was about to update the subsidized housing inventory numbers, and they thought it would be good to add some more housing to the subsidized housing inventory. And so that's where the motivation came from. And the town of Hudson also had a vacant police station that wasn't being used for anything. It was deteriorating. It was kind of an eyesore. And it happened to be a big site and a good location for housing. So those two things came together, and the Affordable Housing Trust received a technical assistance grant from Mass Housing that funded a feasibility study. They did a lot of community engagement, and they released a request for proposals for the site, which of course they already owned. And it was a competitive RFP process. They got multiple responses, multiple proposals for the site, including one from Metro West.
How many units did that end up being, Sharon? I'm sorry, you're going into it. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, no problem.
40.
So then Metro West takes over and some of the details of the project. So the site is an apartment building, which you can see on the right under construction. And we were able to, it's a big enough site that there are townhomes along the street, which kind of better match the single family homes across the street. And then there's a bigger apartment building behind the townhomes where it's less visible. It is more expensive to build townhomes and to build multiple buildings. We were able to do it here partially because the town provided the land. So it may not work for every site, but sometimes you can make it work. And if it makes sense for the context, we permitted this through 40B, through the Executive Office of Housing and Livable Communities. 40B projects get just their eligibility through different entities, and so that's the one we use because we're an all affordable, we propose all affordable developments. This project received the land for a nominal amount, $100, and $650,000 from the Affordable Housing Trust. And it's 40 apartments. They're all affordable rental at a range from up to 30% of the area median income to up to 60% of the area median income.
And Sharon, quick question. This is obviously a key point. Besides the land, you obviously received additional funds, and it was about 16 grand, per unit, if I'm just doing the math. Pretty typical for you guys to have, besides receiving land for free, receiving funds from local municipalities as well to make the gap. Just
Yes.
more for the board's benefit to understand.
Yes, that's very typical.
Can I ask a quick follow-up question on that?
Sure.
Because I actually spoke to somebody from Metro West when we were, and I keep referring to the 21 Highland Street, Sharon. There was a vacant school building in town that we were researching a couple of years ago for possible conversion to affordable housing. And I actually spoke to somebody from Metro West about this. And one thing that he had said is that the number of units you need is a function of how it pencils out. So the more money the town puts in, it's possible to have fewer units if the town puts in more money. Conversely, if the town puts in less money, it's just a matter of scaling. You need to get more units to make the project pencil out. Is that an accurate sort of in terms of the town's financial contributions beyond the land or with the land?
Yes, I would say that's definitely true. And the minimum number of units that you need to pencil out definitely depends on, it depends on if you're paying for the land. It depends on the cost of building. Is it renovation? Is it new construction? Are there any, special things about the site that make it more expensive? I would say, I've been talking about $650,000 as an example contribution from the town, but that is a pretty small overall percentage of the budget for a project like this. So 62 Packard Street, the total cost is actually about $22 million. So it's a much bigger overall price tag. And a bigger contribution from a city or a town definitely would affect the smallest minimum number of units. But I just want to give you context that it would have to be a very large amount.
I see. To really
significantly affect-
40 is really your number, and absent a really significant municipal contribution to the finance.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And so this project construction started in September. Knock on wood, it's going smoothly. It's scheduled to be done at the beginning of 2025. And we're about to start marketing for it later in the summer. And it will have a 70% local preference at initial lease up, which is something towns often ask about. That local preference is subject to approval by EOHLC. And it's also subject to funding compliance and exactly how it applies. Sometimes it can't apply to some of the apartments with the project-based vouchers, that ongoing subsidy, because of federal rules about fair housing. So I just want to point out, it is pretty typical for our projects to have 70% local preference, but there are a lot of asterisks that you need to add about the details of how that works out in practice and the compliance.
Sharon, quick question on that too, because I know with Chapter 40Bs, it has the same kind of thing, a 70% preference. That can be, Chapter 40Bs, I know it can be both for existing town residents or town employees. And more curious if that's the same case here too as well. Obviously subject to, funding compliance, but just curious if that's correct.
Yes, sure. It could be town residents or employees.
Okay, great.
Sharon, I had a question along the lines of the funds that you received from the municipality. Now, so after the project is completed and the units are all leased and occupied, do these sites pay these municipalities property taxes?
Yes, they do. Once they're occupied, each individual property is owned by an LLC that's created just for that development. And that entity pays typical property taxes. And a
Okay.
town can choose to give an abatement of property taxes if it helps the numbers for the project, but they definitely don't have to. And we would pay typical property taxes, yeah.
So out of the 154 units that you guys are owning and running, what percentage of those would you say are paying like a full market assessment to the towns?
I might look to Caitlin to answer that. I don't know. I don't think we have many abatements, but I'm gonna let Caitlin answer.
That's right. We have one smaller community that has a pilot, a payment in lieu of taxes agreement. Our others are, for the most part, paying the standard kind of, tax payment, that other properties would.
That's great. Thank you.
If a town's open to that, it can help the financing if, you know, it's another way to give subsidy. But it's not usually not necessary. Great. Well, that's our overview, and definitely happy to answer any other questions folks have.
So Sharon, first of all, this is great. If you could, are you okay with sending this presentation? Because that'd be great. I just thought, you know, I know we've talked on the phone, and I'm a bit familiar with affordable housing development, but this is actually a really great presentation that really kind of shows the overview of how you guys have worked with towns and how the process is. So I just really appreciate the presentation. I thought it was great.
Thanks. Yeah, I can definitely send you the slides.
I had a
One of the things, go ahead, Paul, you go first.
Yeah, can you talk about what you see that typically trips up projects, you know, and maybe prevents them from ever getting off the ground?
Sure. I think one typical thing, and I've already stressed it a lot, but when towns issue an RFP and they haven't done technical assistance, or they haven't worked with someone to provide technical assistance, it can be easy for the RFP to be for a project that really isn't financially feasible. Or they might not have enough detail, and that can make it really hard for a developer to answer the RFP and to put forward a proposal they're confident about. So that is, I've said it a lot, that is one of the things we see a lot. So working with technical assistance and kind of getting the examples that I already listed right about the disposition process, enough due diligence, all of those things is a big one. Another thing, I'm not sure I'd say we've seen this trip things up, but definitely, as I've already said, community engagement at the start is just really, really helpful to get buy-in for the project, to make permitting go smoother, things like that.
By that, are you talking about abutters or everybody in town?
I would say, you know, definitely the more abutters know about the project to start, the better. But I would say both, especially because often, you know, more and more there are voices in cities and towns about the need for affordable housing and kind of more general support for it. Caitlin, would you say that's fair?
Yeah, I would definitely say that's fair. And I would also say it's really helpful when a particular project can be connected to a larger mission that has been established by the town through either a master planning effort or a housing production plan. You know, because when we can kind of point to, you know, prior efforts that have kind of wide support and agreement around the goals of the town, that can be really helpful to point through to during community process.
Yeah,
Thank
so
you.
yeah, sure.
Sharon, is it, just on one random technical question, is it typical for the town to get a feasibility study before submitting the RFP? So it's like part of the RFP package, or the developer doesn't do that on their own after they want to know ahead of time what they're bidding on before they submit an RFP? Is that the way it
Yes,
works?
exactly. So, you know, in our dream RFP, the town would have commissioned a feasibility study. They would have had a surveyor do a survey of existing conditions. They would have an environmental engineer look at do a phase 1 assessment of the site. They might even have tested the soil. You know, if it's an existing building, they'll have done a lot of maybe studies and testing to make sure it's a good idea that can be reused for affordable housing, and to look at hazardous materials.
Oof. I mean, that's
Yeah.
$30,000 of expenditures, you know,
Well,
more.
That's why you get the mass housing grant.
Yeah, gotcha. And the mass housing grants will pay for the for the phase 1 and for the survey and all that stuff too. Really? Okay.
Yep.
Gotcha. Thanks.
And what do you need to have in line to get one of those grants? I mean, you need to have a site in mind, I guess, and do you have to already own it?
I'm not sure. I would guess maybe not, but Caitlin, do you know?
Yeah, I don't think you have to have much in hand. I think it's, you know, if you reach out early and they can tell you, you know, talk you through where you are and provide advice about whether there's more that you need before receiving a grant. But I think either the staff at Mass Housing or MHP could really, you know, get a good understanding of where you are and if there's anything you might need to do before you'd be eligible.
I imagine if you have a property under agreement, that's a pretty good sign, but it does seem like, you know, if you're just kind of kicking up around an idea about a project, that mass housing is not going to give you, you know, a $50,000 grant to do a bunch of stuff just because you're taking a look at a property, right?
Yeah, Paul and Tom, I do think so there is a contact that we have at Mass Housing. I've had a brief discussion with them, but Tom, you're right. I mean, I think there's definitely funds there available on a rotating basis or constantly. But I think they are looking for you to have a site, you know, under control.
Under control, at least, yeah.
Yeah. So
I can imagine.
but definitely once there is a site or there's a vision for a specific site, and again, site control may not actually own it, but site control. But then I think there are definitely funds available for the consultant as well as due diligence. So I think that's helpful.
Yeah, cool.
One other thing I should just bring up, Sharon and I talked about it when we had a brief discussion. So more for the board, but obviously we're a septic town, right? We do not have town sewer. But again, for the scale, just to give you guys a heads up, at least from some research I've done, the scale of developments that we're talking to would still be just a septic field, you know, not a wastewater treatment plant or anything heavy duty, because we're talking about, you know, a 25 to 40 unit range. So more just generally, but that's something that is another consideration, because I think, Sharon, as you told me, I think most of your projects have had town sewer, correct?
Yes, all of Metro West projects have had town sewer. We do know of at least, you know, a couple peers that have done local systems, and we know the limit for that is 90 bedrooms, and like you said, that would fit with the kind of 40 unit range.
Yep.
But it definitely might add to the cost. And that would be another great use of the Mass Housing Technical Assistance Grant to look at that.
So I guess any other questions that folks have for Sharon or Caitlin?
Yeah, this might be a little out there, but you mentioned like sustainability is a big thing for you guys. And I know Framingham just started a geothermal project for a development there. And I wonder if stuff like that is, you know, within the realm of possibility is part of your developments.
I don't know. It's not something we've ever looked at. Off the cuff, I would say my guess would be it would be a pretty expensive investment for 40 apartments. I don't know how big that development is in Framingham, but if the town wanted to provide the funding to do geothermal at a property, we'd look into it.
Well, in Framingham, it was I think it was Eversource that did it for nothing. You know, it was like a test for them. So you know, just a thought.
Thank you very much for coming. Really good to
Great.
hear it.
Yeah, this was great.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, really appreciate your guys' time. Thank you so much. Look forward to seeing the slides. And, you know, again, I think Southborough and Shopc are, you know, really definitely trying to find opportunities and figure this out. And I think, you know, some of the scale that you guys have done is definitely very interesting. The townhomes I also think are very interesting as well, you know, for the scale of Southborough. So just want to say I really appreciate your time tonight. Thank you.
Great. Thanks very much for having us, and thank you for being interested in building affordable housing.
Great. All right. Well, have a great evening. Thank you.
Great.
Thanks.
Bye.
Thanks a lot.
Take care.
All right. All right, next item on the, oh, I am the host now. I don't know how I don't know how I became the host suddenly. All right, so guys, apologize obviously for the technical difficulties. I'll reach out to Hassan obviously and make sure I'm the host, you know, going forward, or at least maybe two of us are hosts going forward. I think the next order of business is for us to appoint a new chair and a vice chair of the committee. So I'll put that out there.
Well, Doug, I can make the motion to appoint Doug Mans as chair of Shopc.
Second.
All right, all those in favor? I don't know if we do a roll call, we just do all aye, but
Yep.
usually I think, yeah.
It's a roll
so,
call vote.
Roll call. All right, so a motion on the table to appoint me as chair, seconded by Jesse, seconded by Paul. So Jesse, are
Aye.
you in? Paul
I,
and Tom.
Aye.
All right. Now I would suggest that we also appoint a vice chair, just in case of absences or other things. Any motions for someone to be vice chair? Or any
Yeah, I'll make the motion
volunteers?
that we nominate Paul Desmond to be vice chair of Shopc.
I'll
If he's
second
willing.
that.
Paul, any objections?
not violent ones, no, but
All right, a motion on the table by Jesse Stein to appoint Paul Desmond as vice chair, seconded by Tom. Be a roll call vote. All in favor? I will go to Jesse first.
Aye.
Tom,
Aye.
Paul,
I,
and Doug, aye. All right, great. So excellent. So I think we have our new chair and vice chair. So what I'll do is, Paul, what I will do when I talk to Hassan, I'll make sure that we're both hosts, right? So if there's any logistical issues, you know, we have it. And Tom, so are you having issues getting the link? Is that what's going on, or
Yeah,
is it
no,
more
this is
just-
a long-standing thing. I got one
Okay.
computer that I won't give you a long story. It's
Yep.
it's on my end. It's not on
Okay.
your end.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we can just appoint you. Promote you when you will keep an eye
Yeah,
out for you.
hopefully I have it sorted out. It's just
Yep.
a matter of getting into my town email address to get the links. But you know, when you sent me a link, then I became Doug Mans.
Yep.
That was the
Yep.
quirky thing. I see.
Yep.
Yeah, I gotcha. Okay.
I do want more black in my beard, so if I want to be your doppelganger. And
I
not
don't have
move
much
you
more to
around.
give you.
I think my gray percentage is a little higher. So I think next item on the agenda is for Paul, for you to give us an update of the conference you attended, which would be great. So I'll turn it over to you for your update.
yep, I sent out a couple documents yesterday. Everybody get those? I don't know if you had a chance to read them, but I don't want to go through the whole thing, but it was really valuable. I mean, it was some of the stuff that we just heard was resonating because it was a lot of the same things I heard there. But to me, it kind of brought home there's a lot to be done on a couple of fronts here, and one is sort of PR, as they mentioned, just getting the word out. I guess on how big of a problem this is, housing in general and in Southborough, just kind of needs to do its part on this affordable housing problem. And two is getting the work done. I mean, as we just heard, these are heavy lists, and I don't know that it's feasible for a group of volunteers like us to make this kind of stuff happen. Although it was really good to hear them say that they do a lot of the the grunt work, I guess, like in terms of the financing and stuff like that, because it gets real complicated real quick. And I don't know what kind of resources we have. Like, I also serve in the school committee, and there it's much easier because you act like a board of directors almost, and you bring up ideas, and they have a whole staff to do things, the superintendent and his whole staff. And I don't know to what extent we have anything similar on the town side. So I guess it's just kind of a question. But if you read the notes I had, I mean, the need is striking here. There was one guy, the executive director of the Mass Housing Partnership, says we're 55,000 units short of what we need for a stable housing market, meaning with, some kind of normal vacancy rate. I mean, I don't know if you've been reading, like in Boston, it's just crazy. There's like the vacancy rate is less than 1%, I think, and people are just paying through the nose. There was a lot of good resources they mentioned. So a woman from the North Middlesex Council of Governments gave a brief presentation, and they touted this accelerator playbook, which was a guide for local officials to boost housing supply. And that seemed like it had a lot of good info in it. There was a guy from the Mass Taxpayers Foundation who basically kind of batted down a lot of the arguments that you hear against growth in towns in general. He was saying like the property values. He compared Dartmouth with Shrewsbury. Dartmouth between 2007 and 2022, Shrewsbury grew by about 15%, and their property values grew by 35%. Whereas in Dartmouth, growth was pretty much stagnant. Property values only increased 15%. So it's just, it's stuff like this that I think you can use as part of the PR effort I mentioned to sort of combat any arguments against growth being a good thing. What else? Those are, I guess, some of the highlights. There was a woman from a different developer, similar to the one we just heard, who gave an example of a development in Brockport, which was interesting. It combined 17 units for seniors and then 6 townhomes for families. It's a little unusual, but she said it was, everybody loves it. The seniors love having kids around, and it's something that I had never heard of. And it was also a good example of how they got support early on. In fact, they even got one abutter to donate some property for the thing. So, I mean, from that respect, it was, I guess, encouraging because, people are doing this stuff. And again, like we just heard, I mean, there's one right next door in Hudson that's happening. So, I guess, I don't know what's going to happen to the fate of Shopc, how much longer I'm going to be around, but, it seems like you need somebody advocating for this stuff and just trying to make the case for to the town and to the community that this stuff is necessary.
Yeah, I mean, you just to dovetail on that, Paul. I mean, we as Shopc are, we don't, exactly to your point, we don't have a $20 million war chest to go out there and do affordable housing developments. We're just kind of a facilitating. We can't execute on anything. We're the people that are supposed to facilitate affordable housing, and that's why there's supposed to be a member of the select board on Shopc and a member of Jesse from the planning board, so that we all have all these different levers of government that we have access to come up with affordable housing ideas and projects and initiatives and bring it to them, and then encourage them to execute on them. So I don't think that Shopc is falling short in that regard. I think the problem up to this point is the execution on, and I'm a little bit cynical in that, I think some of the things that the select board has been in favor of, some of the projects we've proposed out there and looked at, it's just, there just hasn't been political will to follow through on it and do it. Once there's opposition, it just kind of goes into the tank. So, part of that is on us to put more pressure on the select board members to have a stronger spine to keep these affordable housing projects online in the face of opposition, because there's always going to be opposition. And so if it's a matter of there being opposition, they're going to fold, then we're never going to get affordable housing, because there's always going to be opposition. So I don't know, that's part of what I think need to do a better job doing, is putting more pressure on or being more persuasive to encourage the executors to execute in the face of opposition.
Yeah, I think it's not just the executors and but the community at large. I mean, if we can get a groundswell of support for this stuff, then I think the select board may well change its tune. And you know, that's I don't know. You know what? Actually, I did want to bring up one other thing that there was a couple of there's a thing called community land trust. Do you guys know about this? Where people like you can designate an area of town. It's usually donated, I guess, or the town buys it, and it's used in perpetuity for some reason that the town deems, you know, is useful for the town, and that includes affordable housing. So like they had this guy from Amherst who they've used it to build, I think he said 7 or 8 houses over the last few years. But that kind of got me thinking about this other avenue, which was trying to get people to just contribute money to buy land. I mean, it seems to me the biggest problem here is money, right? And that, you know, that was the problem with the 61A development on Northborough Road is that, you know, it was almost dismissed out of hand that we didn't have enough money to make a viable bid for this thing, which I'm not sure is true. I'm not sure we ever really looked at it hard enough, but that's where we are. So what if you went to, you know, we got a lot of wealthy people in town. And they in Amherst, they and other places, they've made the case that, you know, this is a way to give back to your town, as well as, you know, help out people who need it. And, you know, and it's what's the word? Something that'll live on beyond you, you know. And I think you can make the case for that out some people at least, it'll resonate. So that, you know, might be another funding source to look at.
You know, I do think it's a unique period of time. I mean, there is definitely a housing crisis. And again, I think, Paul, you heard the 55,000 number. I've heard a 200,000 unit number, right? You know, we just don't produce enough housing. And so there's definitely a supply and an affordability issue. And I do think for Southborough, that's a unique time that the Commonwealth is offering a lot more funding support for these types of things.
Yeah.
And I do think, you know, it's where I think this committee wants to be, is in a better position where if a 61A parcel does come up in the future, right, that, you know, we're more prepared to chase it. I do think the Northborough parcels are probably very large and very expensive per se, just because of the scale of them, but not necessarily getting into the weeds there. But, you know, I definitely think it's, you know, I mean, a certain moment in time right now that there's probably more resources available and everyone understands there is a crisis, right? So that might help create the political will. We obviously got to find the right site, you know, and, you know, kind of try to work that out, you know, and obviously no site's ever perfect for everyone in town, right? That's going to be the other challenge. So, but, you know, but Paul, appreciate the update and the information, you know, on the conference that you provided. I don't know if anyone has any other questions. We have one more item to kind of, well, 2 more items. One, I have more of a question, but any other questions on this or thoughts on this before we move on? So on the agenda, there was approval of meeting minutes for June 6th. I am not aware. I haven't seen any meeting minutes. I don't know if you guys have. I wasn't at the meeting on June, so I don't know if there's any action on that item. It was on the agenda, but I don't. Did anyone see any meeting minutes from that?
I haven't.
Okay.
I was at the meeting either, Doug.
Yeah. Okay. The next item is not on the agenda, so we really can't talk about it or get into details of it, but the selectmen did set up a working group between the Affordable Housing Trust and Shopc. I think for our side, it was intended to be Dorianne and Paul, yourself, that were going to be on it. And it was going to be a combination of a couple of folks. I think it was Andrew Dennington, potentially Al Hamilton, and maybe another person. But with Dorian no longer on Shopc, we do need to put somebody else into that, you know, position. I don't know if it actually requires a vote. Maybe it does. If it does, we're gonna have to set up another meeting to come back and do that quickly, just so it can be posted on an agenda. But I'm gonna pause there because that's the topic. I don't know, Jesse, if you have any thoughts, or Tom, any thoughts on this?
Well,
how we
wouldn't
replace
that be a
Dorian?
select board action item to appoint or request an appointment? I'm not sure if we need to actually take any action on that, but that's just my thought on it.
Yep.
I'm not sure.
I can reach out to Andrew and ask. Andrew did reach out to me and just brought up the topic, right? Just, because there's a gap. I think he thinks we need to take some action, but I can reach out to him. And if we do, we can get maybe a quick 5 to 10 meeting minutes on the books just to get somebody into that slot, but I can follow more up on that, Jesse.
Actually, I think another way we've handled stuff like this in school committees is if anyone's interested, let the chair know. Done.
Yeah, I certainly would not oppose any of you gentlemen's appointment. So
Yeah, I wouldn't either. I don't.
please feel free.
Okay. On that note, any interest, Tom or Jesse, from you guys on that, or just so I'm aware, I'm also more than happy to step into Dorian's role too, but I'm not.
Doug, I'll get back to you on that. The planning board has an agenda item on our next meeting for the select board appointments, and my involvement in Shopc is part of that discussion.
Okay.
So I think I'll have a better sense of whether or not it makes sense to appoint me to that working group after the next planning board meeting. I'm
Okay.
really not sure that at this point. So to that end, it may make sense to appoint a different member other than myself, or recommend the select board appoint, I should say.
And Tom, any interest on your end?
Yeah, I'm not particularly interested in it, but
Okay.
I see where this is falling. I don't want to put any more burden on you and Paul either. So if you need a body to do it, I'm willing to do it if you need to. If you and Paul are interested in doing it, I would love for you guys to do it. But if you say, hey, well, I'm already doing this, I'm already the vice chair, and we need somebody to do this, then if you need a body, I'll take the sword.
Okay. All right. So I'll follow up with Andrew just to clarify what we need to do, if anything, and I'll get back to you guys. I think the only last item is to potentially talk about a next meeting. I don't think we actually need to meet in August, being summer, unless you guys disagree. Do we want to put a meeting on the books for some time in September? At least to have something posted. I'm not sure what the agenda would be at this point, but we can talk about that too as well. But so when do you guys want to meet next, and what are you guys thinking about for topics on that?
I'm chamming with 2 points just that ticked into my head. One is September. Anytime in September is good idea for me. And another thing that we should talk about at some point. Actually, 2 things that come to my head. One is that this whole Northborough right of first refusal. I know that's probably not going to get off the ground, but it did trigger, kind of a discussion with us and with Freddie Gillespie from Open Space they said, look, we were, sort of loosely collaborating on the 61C property because Open Space was amenable to it, to have a portion of the property be open space and combined with affordable housing and part of it. So there was kind of 2 different agencies jointly working together to promote something. I think was a good idea. One thing, Freddie offered out, and I think we should take her up on it, is to say, okay, if this doesn't work because the select board thinks it's too expensive, let's go looking for other properties around town that might be less expensive that we can sort of collaborate with on and try to get some joint agency support, up front and going forward. So it's something to, I think, maybe explore over the next year of this, under your new reign, Doug, of something to look at. And then the other thing I'd throw out there is another just kind of objective we should do is we've been talking about this for a long time. It just nothing's ever happened with it, which is when we did the housing production plan a few years back. The consultants did a comprehensive view of our entire town, and obviously they said, you badly need housing, and there's a lack of affordable housing, you're aging, and there's no housing for over 55 people, and there's no housing for young people, etc. They sort of made some recommendations, and one of them was to remove barriers to affordable housing, more dense housing in our zoning bylaws. And there are things like just antiquated parking requirements, and then like we have an over 55 housing permit process in our zoning, but there was this arbitrary cap on the number of units that could go under that was put in 1,000 years ago, and it's still hanging out there. It's just now there's only 3. We put it into the 21 Highland report. There's like only 3 units left under that cap. So why do we have that cap? That's just a barrier to any over 55 housing, which is something we badly need. So I mean, I sort of think that that's the type of thing that we as shops here, whatever we end up being, should be advocating for. And I don't know what the process is. I don't know if we can ourselves propose a zoning change, but just working with the other levels of government, with the select board, to say, hey, we got a problem here. There's this cap on on elderly housing in the town and the zoning bylaws. It's going to take a political persuasion and effort to try to get somebody to actually get to the point where we put an item on the town meeting agenda to get rid of that. So there are like 2 or 3 things in our zoning bylaw that are relatively low hanging fruit. We don't have to spend $20 million of town money. It's just a matter of amending our zoning bylaws to remove some of the barriers to affordable housing. All right, so I'm done.
Yeah, so Tom, I think it's a great topic to discuss at our next meeting. I mean, I do think this is what the state's trying to think about doing too. How do we remove barriers that may exist that were for different purposes? To remove barriers to housing production. So I can definitely put that on the agenda. I can also put just maybe it's a general discussion topic about Chapter 61A approach. For us as a committee. I don't know if we're ready for a joint meeting with Freddie in open space, which we could probably do at some point, but it might be where if we, that's a question for you guys, but that does make sense at some point to me. I think the other topic might be maybe, Paul and potentially I are reporting back on, the progress of the Affordable Housing Working Group too, as well. That could be an agenda item, so those are kind of 3 things that jumped. So I think, Tom, great suggestion. So, but Jesse, Paul, other thoughts?
Yeah, so September 30th, we have a special town meeting. And one of the items on the warrant is going to be MBTA communities. So I know that a moment ago, it seemed like the committee consensus was not to meet between now and August 30th. But just throwing it out there that I think under normal, course of business for this committee, we would probably meet and discuss MBTA communities and, vote, take an official position one way or another. So that would normally be an agenda item. It's not very helpful for me to bring it up now, but we are where we are. And I don't know. Just in case.
Is it already going to be on the warrant, Jesse, the MBTA? Is it? I've been out of the country for a week, so I'm way behind on what's going on in town. Is the MBTA community ready to go to
It's
town
the first
warrant?
thing on the warrant.
Yeah. Okay.
First
Gotcha.
item.
That's really
First
the main
article.
thing. Okay. Gotcha.
Is the plan fully baked, Jesse?
We have not started the public hearings yet. Those start, or I should say restart, because mind you, this was supposed to be in the March warrant.
Right.
And things got off the rails because of errors by the consultant, et cetera. So is it fully baked? The short answer is just about. Yeah, it's kind of like just getting pulled out of the oven and set on the table to cool. And that process metaphorically is the public hearings, the first of which is the next planning board meeting on the 22nd.
Meaning for the planning board to formally endorse it? Is that what
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, yeah,
That
gotcha.
would be normal, and we had
Right.
public hearings going before, so that's why
I
we're a
don't think
little.
it'd be a terrible idea, just because I think, tell me if I'm wrong, I think, we should be in favor, as Shopsy, we should be in
Yeah.
favor of the MBTA communities, because it's creating,
So it
it's
might make sense, Doug, to have a meeting between now and the 30th for us to actually have it as a, agenda item and vote to take a position.
Yeah, I'm definitely good with meeting. And so when you say before the 30th of August, right? Are you saying in August, Jesse,
I don't know. I mean,
or when?
I
That's the
would,
question.
if it was up to me, I would definitely let planning board have its first public hearing on it.
Yep.
On the 22nd. So sometime, in my view, would be between the 22nd and the 30th. And I'm not sure if we need to post a Shopsy agenda or anything like that for the 22nd, unless you guys really feel like you want to show up and deliberate, with a quorum.
Well,
But-
Jesse, do you see us, I mean, how are the tea leaves looking on the MBTA? Because I mean, if you're sort of, some things you want town meeting, you want people to support it, including, people in different agencies standing up in their official capacity saying, yeah, the open space committee is in favor of this, and you speak up. So if
It's a
we,
great question.
as
You know what,
Shopsy
could I
members,
stop you there? I think we're getting a little far afield about, we're supposed to be talking about agenda items for the next meeting, and I think we're straying from that. So, I mean, to me, if the town meeting is September 30th, right? So if we met early September, isn't that
August 30th, Paul.
the
the
town meeting?
town meeting's August 30th?
The special town meeting is August
Oh.
30th at 7 p.m.
Ah,
Oh, thought it was September. Okay.
No, sir.
so well, maybe think about just in terms of, oh wait, Sam is raising his hand. Give me 1 second.
I don't think that's right.
That's what I have in my calendar.
Are you guys, so Sam is raising his hand. Okay, you guys okay? I'm gonna let him talk. Hold on 1 second. Sam, can you hear us? I think you're
Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, letting me talk could be dangerous, but it's September 30th, going over to October 1st. That's the special time.
September 30th.
Thank
Okay.
you, Sam, I apologize. I don't know
No
how I
problem.
had that
Just want to
incorrect.
be sure we're all on the same calendar here. All right, thank you.
Thank
Okay,
you.
so we could have a meeting
Thank
in earlier mid-September to decide whether we want to take a position on the MBTA community.
Sorry about that, guys.
That's
Yeah,
all right.
and also I'm definitely open to having a meeting in August. I mean, I'm around. It's more of a question of timing, right? So Jesse, if you think it'd be good for us to meet as a group, sooner rather than later and not wait till September, I'm okay with that.
No, now that that's been clarified, yeah, I had it just wrong in my calendar.
Okay.
So I trust Mr. Stivers, and on that basis, I think we could just put it on the September agenda.
Okay. So I'll definitely put the MBTA Communities Act. I think it'd be a great discussion for us to have. And I guess, Paul, any other items for your perspective?
Not necessarily for next one, but I like the idea of just having people like that we had tonight just come in and talk about different things. So maybe somebody from the Mass Housing Partnership at some point, and other developers. I don't know. Just other folks who can educate us on.
And that'd be nuts to have Mass Housing Partnership, and they could tell us a little bit how we could qualify for those grants. I mean, we're already starting to, we have this vague lines of a roadmap to doing this, and Mass Housing Partnership part of it. That might be that sounds interesting to me. That sounds a good idea.
No, I think definitely. I mean, I think I can actually follow up on that a little bit. I know Al was not on the call as well. I know he's reached out to a few folks, but I do agree. I mean, I think continuing to get a few other, stakeholders, particularly one that provides financing or technical assistance, could be really helpful. So I can dig into that a little bit more too as well. Okay. And then I guess going back to Jesse's comment, I agree. I don't, unless you guys disagree, I don't think we necessarily need to post the Shopc agenda for one of the planning board meetings. I mean, I think if folks want to attend, I mean, like, I think, you know, I guess the only question is that, do we get into trouble if 3 of us attend as individuals? This is a question, Jesse, for you or for Paul, I guess anyone.
Quorum is 4, and you know, if we're
I think if
concerned-
4 of us were there, including me, and there was deliberation,
right,
then that would be an open.
But I don't think that if we're in the audience commenting that constitutes deliberation. You know what I mean?
Okay.
If the 4 of us got together and said, hey, we 4 of us, you know, what position, you know, we wouldn't be deliberating between the 4 of us. We'd all be there as individual, you know,
yeah. On the other hand, I mean,
citizens.
in the better safe than sorry department, it's, you know, you post it, you say Shopc members will be attending such and such meeting. I mean, and then you cover. So
Sounds good to me.
So I'm definitely could follow up. So, so is
Doug,
it,
since I've already made one calendar error tonight, why don't I just collaborate with you directly and
yeah,
reconfirm
sounds good.
with the town planner before I make another error?
Yeah, I mean, obviously I can work, you know, obviously Jesse with you in the town just to make sure if we need just to have something posted. I mean, again, I think I probably would likely try to attend one of those virtually, right? To listen in, not to really necessarily comment, but I wouldn't be surprised if I'm on at least one of your guys' meetings just to listen in, because I do think it's very interesting and pretty important for the town to figure out. So, but yeah,
same here.
Jesse, we could coordinate directly. That'd be great. And then I guess, so then let's talk about calendars for September. What are people thinking? By the way, Thursday nights are probably better for me, but I can also do Wednesday nights. I should probably, maybe Tuesdays or Thursdays are better, but Jesse, is planning board on Tuesday night or Monday nights?
So Mondays are planning board. Thursday the 5th looks okay for me, if that works for you guys.
It's okay with me.
That works for me too. Yeah.
Yeah, that works for me. 7 p.m., I'm assuming.
Sounds good.
September 5th at 7 p.m. Okay, great. I will get that put together, and I'll get an agenda together and make sure I get that meeting posted with the town.
Yeah, Doug, I'll just shoot you tomorrow the exact dates of the public hearings for MBTA communities.
Okay, great. Great. And this is more for, you guys might know this, but more for my knowledge. I'm coordinating with Jim Haggerty for postings, right? For agendas, correct? Is that? Yep. Okay.
Town
Awesome.
clerk. Yeah.
Yep. Town clerk. Yep. Okay, great. All right. I think that's it. If nothing else, do I have a motion to close the meeting?
So moved.
Second.
Excellent. All right. All those in favor, I'll go around. Jesse, Paul,
Aye.
Tom, aka Doug,
Aye.
and Doug is aye. All right, guys. Thank you. Appreciate it. Sorry for the technical difficulties. I'll make sure I get that worked out, and Jesse will follow up with you tomorrow. We'll go from there. Thanks,
Nice
everyone.
job,
Sounds
Doug.
good.
See ya,
Thanks,
everybody.
guys. Good job.
Thank you.
Bye.